Das Thema heute ist Passiv. Die Sätze sind teilweise auf Deutsch und ich werde alles in diesem Video auf Englisch erklären. Los geht's. Let's start with an example in English first. This is an example of an active sentence. What does that mean? Well, the subject of this sentence, the kids, or the nominative case, like it would be in German, the subject is doing the verb in this sentence. That's normal. The subject is doing the verb to the direct object. The direct object is what receives the action of the verb. It's what gets verbed. It's the accusative case. So that's what active means. Okay, so let's look at the same idea, but this time in the passive voice. So in an active sentence, the subject does the verb, but in a passive sentence, the subject gets the verb done to it. That's what makes it passive. So the cookies are being eaten. Now this part, by the kids, that's what's called the agent. That tells you who is doing it. So to go from an active sentence to a passive sentence, we're going to turn the subject from active into the agent in passive, telling you who does the verb. And the direct object, the thing getting verbed in the active sentence, gets turned into the subject in the passive sentence. So active, the kids are eating the cookies, and passive, the cookies are being eaten by the kids. To make the passive voice in English, we use the verb to be, and then the past participle of the main verb of the sentence. So the verb to be is your helping verb or your auxiliary verb in the sentence, are, and eaten, that is your past participle, your past tense verb. Now let's do the same example sentence, but in German, and I'm going to keep explaining in English for right now. So, die Kinder essen die Kekse. The children eat the cookies. So once again, this is an active sentence, and it's active because your subject, die Kinder, the children, is doing the verb in this sentence. So the children, nominative case, subject, are eating, essen. Was essen die Kinder? Kekse. So cookies, the cookies, they are the direct object and in the accusative case. Now let's look at this one just like we did the last sentence. So passive voice, die Kekse, the cookies, this is our subject, and it's nominative case. Again, in passive voice, it's being acted on by the verb, or verbs in this case, so werden und gegessen. Again, gegessen, that's your past participle or your past tense form. And werden, this is your helping verb. Notice how in an English sentence the helping verb is to be. In German, your helping verb is werden, but your past tense form is basically the same idea. Here we have the agent again. In German, the agent is usually formed by von and the dative case. So von, that's a dative preposition, plus whatever comes after it is in dative case. The idea of how to go from active to passive works exactly the same way. So the direct object, the thing that's getting verbed in an active sentence, becomes the subject in a passive sentence. It's still the thing that's being verbed, but since it's passive voice, it's now the subject. And then the subject from the active sentence, the thing that's doing the verbing, becomes the agent in a passive sentence. Now, what's kind of interesting too is that in a passive sentence, you don't necessarily have to have an agent. So if we take out the agent here, die Kekse werden gegessen, the cookies are being eaten, it's still a perfectly good sentence. So let's talk about some examples where you wouldn't have an agent. So for like a crime report on the news, a man was robbed outside a bar last night. We don't know who robbed this man, so it's best to use passive voice without any agent. Or like if your bike was stolen, you don't know who stole your bike, you just know that it's gone. So you don't say who it was stolen by because you don't know. Or a third example, so that they're not all negative, a birthday present was put in my mailbox. I don't know who did it, but I know that it happened, so I'm going to use the passive voice, but I don't have to have an agent. I don't know who to say did the thing, so just going to use passive voice. Let's look at another example in German of an active sentence. So, mein Bruder füttert den Hund. My brother feeds the dog. Here, mein Bruder, my brother, he's the subject. Füttert is your verb. And then den Hund is what or whom, I guess, your brother is feeding. So that is your direct object in the accusative case. Here is the same idea, but rewritten as a passive sentence. So, der Hund wird von meinem Bruder gefüttert. Der Hund, the dog, is now the subject. It's still the thing that's being verbed, being fed, but because it's passive, the thing that receives the action of the verb is now the subject. It's now nominative case. The verbs work the same way. So we've got our helping verb, werden, plus our Partizip Perfekt, our past tense of the main verb. And again, in this sentence, we've got our agent, von plus dative case. And so the Hund, the dog, is being fed by my brother. Just like in our last example, we can completely take out the agent and just say that the dog is being fed. Der Hund wird gefüttert. Again, perfectly fine. For passive voice, not a problem. Let's make this a little harder and do an example of an active sentence that has a modal verb. So here we've got mein Bruder, he's still the subject, and he's still feeding the dog. The dog is still the direct object, still receiving the action of the verb, still accusative. But now we've got a modal helping verb. So muss is our modal verb, and füttern now is our infinitive form. The main verb is infinitive at the end. This is just like any sentence you've seen with a modal verb before. There's nothing crazy or new about this. So in this passive example, the dog has to be fed by your brother. Der Hund muss von meinem Bruder gefüttert werden. So der Hund, the dog, is still the subject. We still have our modal verb müssen, muss in this case. We've got an agent telling you who is doing the feeding. Gefüttert is the past tense like you would expect, but now at the end, werden becomes the infinitive. So we just kind of add werden to the end of it, because when you have a modal verb, your verb at the end has to be infinitive. So in this case, because it's passive voice, we just put werden at the end, and that's it. Now let's say that the dog still has to be fed, obviously, because we don't want the dog to die. But it doesn't matter who feeds him, because maybe everybody in the family helps and it's not just your brother. Then we can take out the agent completely. Der Hund muss gefüttert werden. The dog must be fed. That's a good sentence for all of the dogs watching this video. You may have noticed that almost all of my examples were in present tense, like the dog being fed. That's because I think it's probably a good idea to learn passive voice, what it is and how to do it in present tense first. I'll probably make another video soon explaining different tenses and how to do those. Thanks for watching.